Hey kiddos. Alright, now this video is a little bit different than the one where we are modeling finding the percent of a known number. And when we find the percent of a known number, we also prove it with math. Well, for these, we are finding an unknown whole when we are given the part and the percent. So let's start with an example. Now, I would like you to have a paper, a pencil, either a highlighter or a marker or something to shade with. And if you have your MSG, we may be looking at this. We have a page in there that looks like this, so we may be using your MSG from time to time. If not, you'll be okay, but it's a good idea to bring your MSG home anyways, so you have it when you study. Well, let's get started with an example. We are going to start with this one. 18 is 40% of what number? Okay, now before we model, before we draw, before we do anything, I always think it's a good math habit when you see that percent sign to write 100% under it, because percents will always be considered out of 100. Now let's look again at this problem. It tells us that 18 is 40% of what number? This right here is our unknown. We don't know what 18 is 40% of, so we're going to build a model to find out. So let's start with our rectangular diagram. Technically, this is a double bar diagram. Our top bar is going to represent percents, and percents always go from 0 to 100. And our bottom bar is representing our number. Well, we don't know what the whole number is, so we'll just put a little box right there. We're going to need to fill in that blank while we work. So 100% of whatever this number is will go here, and 0% of any number is always 0. So now I'm going to cut this into pieces. Now, just like the models we've done before, I want to cut this into pieces, and I think it's a good idea to use pieces that are as big as possible, where you will land on 40% and 100% exactly. So if you need to look at your MSG page, obviously if we left it as a whole, we would land on 100% but never 40. If we cut it into two pieces and each piece is worth 50%, we'll get close to 40, but we have to be exactly there. If we cut it into 4 pieces and they're each worth 25%, again, we'll land on 25% and 50% and 75% and 100. So we'll get to 100%, but we'll never get to 40. But if I cut my diagram into pieces that are each worth 20%, there's 20%, 40, 60, 80, and 100%. So I need to cut this into 5 pieces. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now on my percent portion, each piece represents 20% of the whole. So there's 20, 40, 60, 80, and 100. Whenever you divide up those pieces, the sum of the percents should always be 100. So it's a good spot to double check. So now I've got my number, the part of my diagram that's modeling my number. Again, I don't know the whole, but I do know what 40% of this number is. So here's 20 and 40. I know what this is because it told me in my problem. It told me that 18 is 40% of some mystery number. So I know that this part right here is worth 18. Well, if these parts right here add up to 18, you have to ask yourself, what is each piece worth? Well, it's got to be worth the exact same amount, and 18 divided by 2, and sharing that 18 between those two pieces, of course, is 9. Well, if those two pieces are worth 9, they're all going to be worth 9. And now you have enough information to find your whole. 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9 plus 9, or 5 9s, is 45. So then you could answer something like 18 is 40% of 45. There's your answer statement, and you're done. Let's take a look at another example. Now I'm going to pause for just a moment and write our examples on here so I don't run out of time. So if you need to go and get more materials, go for it. I'll be back in just a sec. Okay. So now we're going to look at our second example. And for this one, we are looking at 36 is 75% of what number? Again, those good math habits. I'm going to write that 75% over 100. And again, this is a problem where we are going to find an unknown whole. The part of this problem here that says of what number, that's the whole that is unknown. But we'll find out in a minute. So let's start with our diagram. I drew my rectangle a moment ago. The top portion of my bar diagram is representing percents. Again, always going from 0 up to 100. And the bottom portion is representing my number. Now, I don't know what the whole number is because it's unknown. But I do know that 0% of any number is always going to equal 0. So now I need to cut this diagram into pieces where I will land on exactly 75% and exactly 100. Now again, if you need to refer back to your MSG, 100 would be too big. If I cut it into pieces that are each worth 50%, I'll never land on 75. But if I cut it into pieces that are each worth 25%, I'll have 25%, 50%, 75%, and of course 100. So I'm going to cut that diagram into 4 pieces. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. On the percent portion of my model, each piece is worth 25%. There's 25, 50, 75, and 100%. And the bottom part is still unknown. I don't know what the whole is, but I do know what 75% of my whole is, because it told me in the problem. I know that 75% of my whole is equal to 36. If that whole piece, or if that whole part right there is worth 36, you can figure out what each piece is worth by sharing this 36 equally among those 3 pieces. And 36 divided by 3, of course, is 12. Well, if those pieces are worth 12, all of the pieces are worth 12. And 4 12s, 12 plus 12 plus 12 plus 12, is 48. So you could finish your problem by saying that 36 is 75% of 48. Let's move on to our third example. For our third example, we are going to model that 30 is 20% of what number? Well, again, there's that good math habit. Percents always come out of 100. And again, right here in my problem where it says of what number, that is our unknown. That's what we need to build the model to find out. And here's my model. The top portion represents percent, all the way from 0 to 100. The bottom portion represents my number. Right now the whole number is my unknown value. Zoom in a little. But I do know that 0% of any number will always equal 0. So now I need to cut this into pieces. When I cut it into pieces, I want to make sure that I'm going to be able to land on exactly 20 and exactly 100. And you probably remember from our first problem that if I cut this into pieces that are 20% in size, I'll land on both 20 and 100. But let's pretend I forgot that, and I'm going to cut this into pieces that are each worth 10%. Watch what will happen. I'll say, okay, I'm going to cut each one of these into 10. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Okay, well each one of these pieces are worth 10%. There's 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, and 100. Okay. Now, I don't know my whole, but I do know what 20% of my whole is. And since 10 plus 10 is 20, that stands for 20. And I know that that is 30. It told me in my problem that 30 is 20% of a number. Well, if this part is worth 30, you can share 30 equally between those two pieces. And when you do, you'll see that each piece is worth 15. Well, if those two pieces are worth 15, then all of these pieces are worth 15. 5, 10, so, sorry, I was counting by the wrong number there. So here I have 10 pieces, and they're each worth 15. Well, 10 times 15, or 15 plus itself 10 times, is 150. So you could finish your problem by saying that 30 is 20% of 150. And that's not a percent. Sorry, I wrote that by accident. Now, if you remember that each one of these pieces could have been cut, that this could have been cut into pieces that were worth 20%, you would have gotten exactly the same answer. You would have gotten the same whole. You just would have gotten it in fewer pieces. Now let's take a look at our last problem. This one here says that 45 is 30% of what number? Of course, my percents always come out of 100. And here, that of what number is my unknown. So I'm going to use my model to find that unknown value. The top portion is representing my percent. The bottom portion represents my number, and I don't know my whole, but I do know that 0% of any number will always equal 0. Well, I need to cut this into pieces where I'm going to land exactly at 30 and exactly at 100. And I know that I'm going to need to cut into pieces that are each worth 10%. Again, you could look at your MSG, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So each one of these pieces represents 10%, 30, 40, 50%, 60%, 70%, 80%, 90%, and 100. And again, I don't know my whole, but I do know a part. The problem tells me that 45 is 30%. So I'm going to go all the way over here. That box I just drew, that 10%, 20%, and 30%, I know is equal to 45 because that's what my problem told me. Well, if these pieces, or if this part is worth 45, each one of those pieces can be found by sharing 45 equally between those three pieces. Well, 45 divided by 3 is 15. And if those pieces are worth 15, then all of these pieces are worth 15. That's kind of weird. It worked out just like the problem we did before. Here I have 10 pieces, and they're each worth 15. So 10 15s, or 15 plus itself 10 times, is 150. So 45 is 30% of 150. There you go.